Before we get started, let's go for Lord in prayer and wonder if anyone has a special request or a praise report they'd like to share. As always, let's make sure to remember those sick around us and all the ones that come through on the prayer chain and stuff. I desire your prayers tonight. Let's try to stand. Yes. Let's be sure to remember all of those that are in the path and deal with the earthquakes and hurricanes and makes these mountains not so bad. Sometimes we have to pay for it in the wintertime, but any others? Good. Thank the Lord for that. Any others? If not, then all those with an unspoken request, Briggs, I heard yours. Let it be known. And that out, we'll come to the altar tonight for prayer. We won't ask no particular person to lead. If anybody wants to come. Most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, again is a privilege that we're able to be in your house. We come tonight, Father, we're thankful for the day that you give us, Father God, for the message that you sent our way this morning, Father. We just praise you and thank you, God, for the provision, Father, Lord, and how that all of our work precisely written, Father God, Lord. Lord, we thank you for that. Lord, we just pray that you help us as we go into your word, Father, and you help us, and lead us, to guide us, to direct us. You be glorified in all that's said and all that's done. We pray for all these requests that have been mentioned, unspoken word, our heart, and our forgiveness. We just pray that God will be with us, God, will guide us and direct us. Lead us, God, Father, in the way that we should go. We ask that God be with you, guide us, this nation. Lord, so many discouraged. The sea will be holding the pattern of it's with you. We just ask, Father, that your spirit, Father, prod on those, Father. We just pray that you put us where our light shines, Father. That we do your work. And that we be about your business, Father. We pray. Lord, if this church, Father, continue, Father, down the work that you set out before us, God. Continue on. So we do pray, God, Lord, for youth tonight, God, Lord. Leaders there, God. And we pray for those in the road traveling. You be with them. Bring them back safely, God. Pray that, God, you will have your will. Lord, just hearts, God, Lord, minds, God, Lord. Each one around us, Father God, would be as a city, God. Lord, we let our light shine. Well, if you have your Bibles tonight, let's go ahead and turn to 1 Peter chapter 4. First Peter in chapter 4. Tonight, entitled the lesson A Matter of Time, and I kind of struggled and just put this title here. I'd been studying on it for some time and looking at it, but then as I went back and started looking at the themes of different verses of Scripture and stuff, that time just kept popping out. And we're going to look a little bit of not necessarily a cross-examination, but, I think I'm not a whole lot different than you all. We kind of like and I've said it before, we like the open road, the smooth sailing. We don't like the bumps in the road, and we definitely don't like the blaze trails. I'm not a trailblazer by no means. I like the smooth sailing. But in our life as Christians, and we go back and we examine and we listen and we see and read the things and the teachings of Jesus, we should not be caught off guard by anything that's going on in the world in which we live today. He created it, perfection at every hand. We messed it up and then started the process of restoration, of bringing us back into what should be done. And we know that's not going to be complete until Christ comes back. And so what do we do in the meantime? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. A matter of time. And I told you we'd go to 1 Peter, but before that, a little background scripture here. And this is Jesus talking to his disciples, and of course he's, giving them a preview, if you will, of things to come. And he says, from that time, and there's where we get part of the title. From that time forth, Jesus began to show the disciples how that he must go into Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and raised again on the third day. Then Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, Be it far from thee, Lord, that this shall not be unto thee. Verse 23, And he turned and said unto Peter, Get thee behind me, Satan. Thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that are of God, but those that are of men. Then said Jesus to his disciple, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever shall lose it for my sake, lose his life for my sake, shall find it. And so we see here, and those are very, as I said, very familiar verses of Scripture, that we love to quote and kind of throw Peter under the bus, if we will, and say, there goes Peter sticking his foot in his mouth again, and Satan and Jesus comes at him pretty harsh and says, Get behind me, Satan. Who are you? And then he says right there, in the verse before, he talks about you savorest the things of men. Okay, and then he follows that up with, but take up your cross daily and follow me. And so when we look at that, we've got this ongoing, here Jesus and his disciples, and you think, well, these are, very holy men, and obviously Jesus was, but still we see the disciples that just don't really understand it completely at this point in time. But they're so much like us. Peter had in mind, just like the rest of us, I think a lot of times when we get saved, that I'm saved and all's well now. It's going to be just smooth sailing from here. And when Jesus says, I'm going to suffer many things, throws the time out there. Peter doesn't say, well, wait a minute. That ain't the way. We're not going to let nothing happen to you. You're building this kingdom here on earth, and we're going to make sure that it's everything that we think it should be. And so many times we continue in that same pattern today, that we think this world's going to be everything that we think it should be. But Jesus tells us the same thing he told Peter then. That's the flesh talking.
That's the flesh talking. And he says, get behind me, Satan. And so we've got this battle between the spirit and the flesh. Okay? The things that are of God, and then we want to incorporate our ideals in it so often. But he tells him three things. He says, number one, deny himself. Okay? The same thing he tells us. We've got to deny ourselves. What does that mean? He's greater than me. Not just on Sunday mornings, but guess what? Tomorrow morning, when life hits us smack in the face, right square in the nose, he's still greater than me. So therefore, his ways have to be greater than my ways. And then the second thing, he says, and take up his cross. Take up his cross. And I think that we say, well, this isn't groundbreaking stuff, and my messages never are. But think about it. Deny yourself. Follow him. Okay? Take up your cross. And when I was going over this, I was thinking about, I'd preached there at one point in time and had the big old cross up here that we'd use from some of the skits and stuff. And we think, well, that one's big and heavy and bulky, but I can get me one of them little crosses in my pockets and put it in there. And there I am. I'm carrying my cross now, but it's not too burdensome for me. And that's the way we like to live. We'll carry our cross as long as it's not real heavy and bulky, or if it's on the good even ground and stuff, but we're going up hills and mountains and valleys and all these different places, and the terrain's rough. Sometimes it's hard to carry the cross, okay? But he says that you deny yourself, take up your cross, and then third thing is follow me. And I think, I don't know if it's pandemics or whatever it is, but I think that we're, not as this church, but as Christians overall, it seems that we're doing okay at number ones and twos, but number three, not so much. That we have denied ourselves. We still recognize who Christ is. That we take up our cross, but we've kind of went into the holding pattern and we're just sitting down. And we're waiting. We're waiting for Jesus to come back, and we're still taking and holding that cross. But he's still got number three that's just as important today as it was then. Follow him. And you can't follow if you're sitting down. There's nowhere that you can have a holding pattern and follow Christ. Okay? So we got to be following him. We got to be moving. We've got to be active still in our faith. And he didn't give us no disclaimers here. When it's safe, follow me. When everybody else is following me, follow me. Or anything else. He says, deny yourself, take up your cross. All right? See, because so many times we say, well, I'll carry their cross. Their cross is easy, and look at their life. It's perfect. But he says, carry your cross. That means whatever cards are dealt to you, Christ says, play them. You carry them. And follow me. Okay? Then he says in verse 25, for whoever shall save his life will lose it. So again, when Peter's going back and he's talking about all this suffering, he says, oh no. But Christ is giving him a little preview right here. This is the way it is. Okay? What we think it's going to be like, it's not going to be that way. But it's going to be far better than what we ever thought it would be like when we don't pay attention to what the here and now. And that's kind of the lesson he's given. So we see here the three steps. Now that's kind of where we're going to pick up now. So I just want to show you, we'll call that the young Peter, if you will. I don't know his age at this point in time, but we know this is during Jesus' earthly ministry. So we're looking somewhere between 30 and 33, AD, after Christ has died. And we know that it's going to be before about 64, 65. Sometime in that time frame when Nero is going to be in charge, Peter is going to die. There's three phases of the persecuted church, and Nero is going to be during the first one. Okay, and so Peter is going to die crucified upside down. So now let's look at the life of Peter. What has Peter learned over this somewhere around 30-year thing? Okay, so now let's listen to what he says here in 1 Peter 4. For as much then as Christ has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. Kind of like a 180, isn't it? When Christ says he was going to have to suffer, and Peter's like, oh no, I'll stand up, I'll cut people's ears off and do whatever needs to be done. We're going to protect you. We're going to take care of this thing. But then through the course of following Christ those last couple of years, being there, you're kind of outsider looking in, from the crucifixion, the resurrection, and all these events that he's witnessed, and then we got him at Pentecost and all this stuff, the experience that Peter's had firsthand. Now he's gained a better understanding of what it was that Christ was telling him back here in Matthew. Okay? And so now Peter is saying, the same way that Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourself likewise in the same mind. And when we look at that about arm yourself likewise, that's a military term. Okay? And I think about that from Jason's standpoint. How many times do I get up every morning and I get my clothes on, I do what I've got to do to get to work and make sure I'm prepared and all that stuff when I get to work. But arm yourself in that same mind. What mindset? That it's a battle. It's a battle. And guess what? There might be some suffering that I have to do that day. There might be some things that I have to go through that gets me off of the good, easy path and have to walk through some unfamiliar territory or maybe some rocky places or whatever it might be. But he's saying, arm yourself likewise in this same mind. What mind? Suffering in the flesh. Okay? For he that has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. And what he's not saying here is that if you have that mind, then you'll no more sin. What he's saying is sin doesn't have dominion over you no longer. Okay? So again, we go back to the same thing that we saw at the very beginning. We've got this twofold, this, battle of the spirit and battle of the flesh. Okay? And it's ongoing. It's an ongoing thing. Okay? So look here, arm yourself, as I said before, is a military term. Be ready for battle. Be prepared. And I think about us on, Friday nights and the whole, I hate the pregame stuff. I told them, me and Luke was talking about that at Eastside the other night. I said, when I first coached, it seems like from the time that you get ready for pregame till the game started was just like, it's there. It's like, it's time to go out, Now it's I hate that hour of coaching, of just sitting there and waiting and waiting and waiting, Let's go. Let's do it. But during that time, there's a lot of preparation that has to be made. And no matter what we do Monday through Thursday or whatever else, if we were to tell them boys, all right, let's go get them, and they don't have proper pads, helmet, and equipment, it ain't going to be much of a battle. Not going to be much of a battle. And so it's the same for us as Christians when he says arm yourself. That it's a battle, make sure you're prepared for the battle. Now here's the thing. We don't know exactly, it's not, if you're a war guru in history and stuff, and, if you go back and if you watch like The Patriot and some of your Civil Wars movies and stuff like that, it's more or less just glorified dodgeball, except for there's lead bullets being fired at you. And that's the way they did it. You'd get in formations of 3, you would shoot, you take a knee, the person behind you would shoot, take a knee, the person with him come up, take a knee. And in the process, that'd be about 45 seconds, and you were supposed to be able to pack, reload, and stand back up your next time and go. And then once you got close enough, then it's just like, go, and they charge, and everybody starts going, and they do all this stuff. That wouldn't be a fun battle by no means, unless you're just behind the guy cheering him on, saying, hurry, reload, it's my turn, But through all that would be difficult. But if you fast forward into modern warfare, you don't know when the attacks are coming or from what direction they're coming. Since World War I and II, everything turned into more of a guerrilla warfare. And that's kind of the way it is in the Christian life. We don't know where the enemy's at. We know this. He's sneaky, and he's lurching around, and he's waiting for us at the right time, at the right day, when we're having that bad day, when we feel like the next person, here it comes. Satan's like, there's your cue, go get him, go get him now. But we don't know when, and so what Peter's telling us here, and what Jesus has told us before, was be ready, arm yourself, because we don't know when and where and how that the devil's going to attack us, but have that same mindset. Okay? And then this here, I like this. Many of us are defeated in our battle against sin because we refuse to sacrifice anything in the battle. We want a safe Christianity. I want a safe Christianity. Okay? And I think a lot of times we enter into our walk with the Lord the way we enter into our marriage with our spouse. That it's going to be perfect. And I remember when my niece and her husband got married out at our place, and they had this sign, and it says, fairy tales? Is that what it said? Fairy tales come true. And then as you drove back out of the driveway, and it says, and they lived happily ever after. I thought, boy, we just set them up for failure. Because it ain't no fairy tale. It's a battle. It's a battle. And you'll live happily ever after, hopefully, most of the time, if it's a good marriage. Sometime if it's not. Okay? But we think that same thing with us as far as Christians. That I got saved and, you know, this halo is just going to follow me around all my life, and it's going to be sunshine. And the first sign of a storm, what do? We go hide. We go hide. And I'm not saying don't be one of them thrill seekers that's always looking to go and just, you know, fight the devil. I think it was Bud Beverly, I think, or one of them that used to say about fighting the devil with the water pistol on some days. I don't want to fight him, period. Okay? But I knew what he meant in the context of that. But we go out and we look for it. But so many times then when storms start coming, we want to hide from them. We want to hide from those storms and because we're not prepared. And sometimes you go through things that you just, you wouldn't want to ever walk through. It's those dark times of life. And maybe it's when you're walking through times with other people for things that they've done, choices that they've made, and you walk through those things. But either way, we have to be prepared. And it starts right here. It starts in the mind, okay, that we do those things because, you know, it takes sacrifice for those battles every day. And we have to be willing to do those things. Otherwise, we're the Peter and Matthew. No, that's never going to happen, Lord. And he's like, yes, it is. Because then he starts talking about tribulations and taking up cross and bearing crosses. You know, it's tough. And when we're not prepared and we don't arm ourselves and we're not prepared and we're not studying to show ourselves approved, we're going to lose a lot of the battles that we could win. And then we're going to blame it on the world. We're going to blame it on the government. We're going to blame it on all these other things. And I think a lot of times it's because we wasn't prepared for the battle like Christ told us to be. Okay? It says we're either feeding the flesh and starving the soul, or we're starving the flesh and feeding the soul. One of those two every single day is getting stronger and the other one's getting weaker. But the thing is, we can't be feeding both. It means I can't be trying to get comfortable in this world, but also doing the things of Christ. And you flip that around. See, I'm either going to feed my spirit and starve those former desires, or I'm going to trinkle around in those former desires, but then my spirit's not going to be ready when battle comes. Go on. 1 Peter 4:3. For the time past, okay, and here's that again about our time. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine, revelings, banquetings, abominable adulteries, okay? And basically, he's just given us a big list of walking in the flesh. Sinful desires, the lust of the eye, lust of the flesh, whatever. Excess in wines, the drinkings, you know, the living it up, the, you know, planning the parties of living it up. And then just anything that sits on the throne of our heart. Whatever it is. And it's easy for us to look at this and say, well, check. Those I don't deal with. That last one gets all of us. And that's not mean that you've got you some idol at home and you go home and you start, bowing down to it or something like that. But what sits on the throne of your heart, again, not just in the good times, because it's like it's here. And I can remember it like it was yesterday. I think I was probably 14, 15 years of age. And that was not just yesterday, I can promise you. That was a lot of yesterdays ago. But I came home from Camp Jacob, and I remember it was a Saturday evening. We came home, and I'd spent the whole summer over there as a youth counselor. And I didn't want to be home. Not because I didn't love my mom and love my dad and love my house and, anything like that, but it was just so easy to live a Christian life over there. Because you woke up, you had God and I time, and then you had this and you had that, and your whole day was planned out, and everything was just Christ-centered. It's like going on the mission trips. It's pretty easy to live a Christian life when you're out there and you're starting your day, you end your day, and it's hard work, and there's a lot of stuff that you're doing, but everything is just so centered on keeping the main thing the main thing. But then we come back home, and we got all these other things that's vying for our time and vying for our attentions and all this stuff right here. And it gets so hard. It gets so hard, okay? And so he's talking about in the times past, these are all the things that we've dealt with. And those abominable idols are just whatever it is that here it comes. That's going to vie for your time, mentally or physically your time, okay? Wherein they think it strange that we run not with them, to the same excess of right, speaking evil of you. Okay? And so those people, the former people we used to hang with, think we've lost it. Why have we changed? What's going on with us? Why are we not like we once were? Okay? That's a tough thing. Because a lot of times you want to keep your former friends, okay? But we have a hard time with the disconnect of who I used to be and who I am now. And that's, again, Peter's talking about in all these things here that, the old way that we used to live, okay? And again, we're talking about time. What are we doing with our time? And then look here in verse 5. Who shall give account to him that is ready to judge the quick and the dead? Great Western, if you've not seen it. Okay? But what basically is what he's saying is the living and the dead, we're all going to stand at judgment. All of us are going to stand at judgment. And so Peter is still giving this analogy of living here and having to suffer some, but weighing it into the scope of eternity. And he's talking about the former things that we did. We all lived as Gentiles, and we've all lived in sin. How much time in sin is too long? Well, any time in sin is too long. Okay? But he says, no longer do we do those things. All right? And so now we see that Peter of Matthew, who says, Lord, don't talk about this suffering stuff, has now got a full grasp on what suffering is all about. He knows the results of it. He knows why we go through those things. That it's making us stronger. It's making us be equipped. And it's the same thing today when we was waiting to come out with the skit. We was talking about, Lord, my wife and her calorie watching and dieting stuff, all that blah, blah, blah stuff. Just not very fun to deal with. And she told me this morning, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to say it anyway, but it's not bad. But she's like, phew, I tell you what, I've got to lose 5 pounds, Jason. These scales, I'm like, listen, I know exactly what you mean, honey. That's the reason I quit getting on them. I don't have to deal with it no more. Just don't get on the scales, and guess what? I just assume that I'm not gaining weight. My clothes tell me otherwise, but I know that I am, okay? But the same thing that we're talking about with this up here, that when we stand and we're putting those old things behind us, and we can block it out the best we can, and just because we don't get on the scale doesn't mean that we don't know what's going on, all right? And that's what Peter's saying here. He said, we've all lived in times past, okay? But that's then, and this is now. This is now. And what are we doing with the here and the now? All right? And so he goes in verse 6, for this cause. For what cause? For the fact that, one, we're suffering as Christians. All right? We're going to go through things. We're going to carry a cross that's going to get heavy at times. And we're going to have to live an uncomfortable life from time to time. And, you know, and pastors talked about that and growing up in that family and stuff. And I know of times of them being on vacation and having to come back from vacation because somebody had called Tommy and needed Tommy to be here. And so pack the bags up. We're going back, you know. And I've been through those things with them. And I know what it's like to wake up in the middle of the night and have somebody on your heart that you know is going through something. And you know, and at times you think it'd be so much, just don't wake me up for these things. You know, just let me focus on just me and not have to do all this suffering on the sakes of others. But listen to hear what he says. But for this cause was the gospel preached. For that cause, because people still dealing with all these things that's up here, me and you, as well as the world. It's easy to say, yeah, the world's dealing with all these things. These things are in the church house as well that we're dealing with. But for this reason, the gospel was preached. And for that reason, the gospel still needs to be preached. And it used to be so easy to sit down there and say, preach it, Tommy. Preach it, TJ. But he's talking about preaching means this. Your time's past. Who were you in the past? You think anybody is like you today that of you of the past that's dealt with some things? I remember the first time I ever heard Scotty give his testimony. I didn't believe a word he said. He talked about playing ball and the things he would do and stuff like that. And I mean, you know, people say, and I party a little bit. And I heard him give some details of those parties, and I was like, but then you start learning of that's just kind of somewhat of a common thing. I know a lot of people that look at them today and say, they used to do that. And now that doesn't mean that we go in and start just advertising and telling everybody everything that we've ever done. But there's somebody dealing with it right now who says, I'll never change and God can't change me. The gospel would say, wait just a minute. It can change anybody. And for that cause, the gospel preached also to them that are dead. And so it's easy, when we look at it, think about the world that we live in as being blind and dead. And so when we go out there and we start telling about all these things, and it's kind of like telling a blind person, oh, look how beautiful that sunset is. Just look how pretty those flowers are. They're blind. They don't see that. Or worse yet, a dead person. Explain to them. They don't see it. But that's where the Spirit comes in. Okay? The gospel is preached. We preach it, and then the Spirit has to do its work. So when you go and you tell your testimony, or when tomorrow, Monday morning, hits you smack in the face, and you thought, well, I'm just going to go into survival mode. And I do that so often. I go into survival mode so much. If I can just get through this day here, tomorrow's a new and I'll start all over again. Well, do you think that the devil don't every day going to hit me with something to get me focused on the problem at hand and not worry about letting my light shine and doing what Christ would have me to do and impacting people's lives in a positive, trying to be a little bit of light in a dark world? But so many times I focus on Jason and I get through this day here. I can't wait to get home. Just get home and, you know, and not have to deal with all this stuff and escape them, you know, safe places. And me, it's on the couch watching Gunsmoke or whatever. But for this cause, Jason, we still got to preach. Church, we still got to preach. We got to keep on going on. Why? There's dead people out there. But there's a gospel of life. There's a spirit of hope. And was talking to a coworker Thursday or Friday. And some of their ideals are just, well, they're out there. And we was talking about, well, I think that there's a cure for cancer and everything, and they've got all of it sealed up. Could be the case. I don't know. But we have the cure for way more than cancer, but we keep it sealed up. You think we live in a world that needs some joy, hope, peace, and love? We know the antidote. We know where to find joy, hope, peace, and love. Isn't that what the gospel's all about? But we conceal it. We conceal it, and we don't share it. And I'm preaching to me, or teaching to me, all right, that they might be judged accordingly to men in the flesh, but live accordingly to God in the Spirit. So we go right back to what we started about in Matthew. It's still that same battle that in Matthew Peter didn't understand, but now he understands. We go through things. Why do we go through things? Because there's a battle. There's a battle between the flesh and through the Spirit. And every single day, it's so easy here, just like it was at Camp Jacob, just like it is on the mission field, to live that life and just be like, I'm so on fire for God. But then when all these other things start hitting us in the face here, but guess what? As of right now, God didn't call me to Camp Jacob, and God's got to call me full-time on the mission field. So guess what? I'm going to have to get uncomfortable. There's going to be some suffering. Why? Because I live in a suffering world. But God wants those dead people to live according to His Spirit. We're that agent. You're that agent. And it's great when we get up here on Sundays and be able to look out and see everybody and see people that you've not seen before. That's awesome. But guess what? There's a lot more people out there that you're going to see tomorrow than we'll ever see standing up here in the pulpit. And so you're just as much of an agent of the gospel as any minister is. All right, so we see in verse 5 that judgment is coming for all. So the question is, how do you spend your time? Okay? Are we killing time or are we investing it? And I'll have to be honest with you. I kill a lot more than I invest by living in a survival mode. Okay? And I don't even like to say survival mode. I make it out to be a lot worse than what it really is. Okay? I mean, at times I put that mask on and you all think I'm in a gas chamber. I don't like it, and I can grumble and I can complain and all this stuff here, and then I'm a school teacher too, so it's not like I'm crawling back in the deep mines several miles and can't see daylight until my shift's over with, and I come out and my back's hurt because I'm not stood up all day. I'm sitting in a rolly chair teaching kids, and talking about survival mode. But I'm thinking about in the mind and all these things that goes on. And that deter or get you focused on the problem at hand instead of what Christ has called you to do. Because we don't want to deal with those things. We want to live in the comfort zone. But in essence, we live in a battle zone. And so Peter's telling us, make sure that we arm ourselves so that we are investing time. How do you invest time? What's the greatest return you'd ever get? Is when somebody says, you're not going to believe what a difference you've made in my life. I sure appreciate that time that you talked to me. I appreciate you listening for me. I know you've been praying for me. That's better than giving somebody $1,000 and say, good luck with the rest of your life. But to actually invest in their life, pray for them, and walk through a dark time with them. That is the greatest investment that we can make. So invest in the lives of others with the gospel. All right? I like this quote here I saw. It says, the best of your time is when you use the rest of your time to invest your time in doing the will of God. And it kind of goes along with what we're talking about today. And Peter's talking about, in times past we lived like the Gentiles. Forget about that stuff. Now, use the rest of your time in doing the will of God. Because here it is. Birth, the in-between stuff, and death. You have no control over this one. You have no control over that one. You've got full control over this one right here. You can live the most healthy life that you want. That doesn't guarantee you're going to buy any time. You can be the healthiest person in the world. That doesn't mean that one day you just don't drop over. You have no control over that. But the in-between stuff, that's the dash. And that's where we all live right now. So what are we doing with the dash? And I think a lot of us get in this holding pattern on the death part. And it's bad, and it is. And, things are lining up, and they are. But we have no control of that death part. And we have no control over when Christ is going to return. You don't have any more insight than I do. But we know this right here. You do this right here, you got a pulse. God's still got plans for you. He's still got plans for you. That's the in-between stuff. And you have full control over that. And you can either use it wasting it or invest in it. Finish with this here, Colossians 3, 23 and 24. And so whatever you do, do it heartily as unto the Lord. Not unto men. There's that flesh-spirit battle. Knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of your inheritance. For ye serve the Lord Christ. And that's one thing you got to remember. And we teach the kids and we coach them, don't just play for the rewards and the accolades. Okay? But as Christians and as kids, knowing that, hey, I'm going out there and I'm practicing every day, and what's the purpose of practice? Because I want to win a championship. I want to have success. And that's kind of a motivation factor. Why do you go to the gym? Well, why do you all go to gyms and work out and stuff? Well, you want to get in better shape. You want to lose some weight. I thought Bob would turn the animals loose downstairs. Heard stomping and kicking and everything going down through there, and she was jazzercising. She's like, you could join me. I opt out. Okay? But why do people do those things? To lose the weight, to get in better shape, to do those things. For the reward. Well, guess what? There's a reward unmatched that awaits each one of us. That awaits each one of us. And I can tell you what, I've been there. Most of the athletic banquets that I've been to, I did a whole lot of this. I should have won that one. I should have won that. But there's coming a time when Christ is going to hand out the awards, and they're not going to be based on who you were or anything else. They're going to be based 100% on performance, what we did for Him. What we did for Him. And then we're going to get that rightful reward. I must work the works of Him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. John 9:4. Does anybody have anything? I hope this is encouragement, because we're looking at a disciple here, and Peter, and a lot of times, Peter's one that shot off at the mouth before he thought. Well, I'll never do that. Well, he did it. I'll walk on the water. Then he started sinking. And so he had great intentions all the way through. But he was a man of action. He was a man of action. And you see him, and from Matthew into 1 Peter, and a lot of the commentaries I've read said that he pretty much knows that his time of a martyr is approaching. And he's starting to look back and living in the world and doing all the things of the flesh. None of that stuff mattered. That's of the past. But now he was prepared. He had armed himself, and he had done the things that he done. So he understood the purpose of sometimes going through the rough spells of the suffering, okay, and the sufferings for Christ. And so when you're going through things, know this: number one, you're not going through them by yourself. Biggest lie of the devil. Nobody else would ever understand if you. No need to tell nobody that, because he wants you to walk through them or crawl through them by yourself. But God surrounded you with an awesome, awesome church. And I guarantee you that ain't none of us going through anything in here that somebody else that's in here tonight hasn't gone through it as well. That loves you and would walk through it with you as well. That's what a church is all about. And Peter understood that. He now understood that. He didn't in Matthew. But it's a process. And if we'll stay faithful and we'll keep on fighting, we'll learn more. and we'll be a better servant because of the things that we've gone through. But guess what? When you go through things, don't hide them. Don't hide them. But share them. Somebody needs to hear your testimony. Somebody needs to hear your testimony. And it won't be like nothing like the talk shows. You can't blame mom, dad, and anybody else. And we live in a world that wants to, well, if I would have had this, I wouldn't be this way. Exactly. Enter in or depart. You're 100%. And I was at Lexington one time at a horse show, and I think I've shared this before, but guy was there, and they had Sunday, had Cowboy Church or whatever else, and the guy was preaching, I don't know, it's 25, 30 years ago. And I still remember. And he said, if you come and accept him as your Lord and Savior today, he'll be your Savior as soon as you invite him into your heart. He said, but it'll be a growing process of him becoming the Lord of your life, because that's a daily choice, that you're going to let him be Lord, and then, he's going to either be Lord of all or not Lord at all. And that's a daily process of submitting and giving him everything. That's good. Absolutely. And there's a lot of them that's giving back too. I kind of noticed that at the lock-in there in the Friday night after the ball game. You come and a lot of kids here, and there's 3 or 4 college kids, and some of them were our kids, Isaiah, and those that are still here and stuff. But then there were some of those that come to UVA-wise that was out here right in the middle of the circle with the rest of our youth, and they were sharing and talking and interacting and stuff like that. And I just think, wow, because I know even like Dalton at Carson Newman, asked him last night, and he's talking about going to church this morning with Josh, one of his roommate, and this, that, and the other. And where are you going? Well, we're going to go here today, And he'll talk about, this was an awesome church, but it just doesn't seem to be that connecting point, to where they're really trying to invest in those kids and pull them in. And we're not trying to hook them and got to come to Mount Olive by no means, but we don't treat those college kids no different than we do anybody else that comes here. We love on them. And we love on them. We don't know what the Spirit of God's doing. And I'll just tell you now, my devotion on Thursday will be what's going on the other side of the mountain. When TJ talked that today, I thought, gosh, that is so true. Man, that we climb and we climb and we climb and we think, gosh, and it's so easy to fall down and say, God, don't you even care? But he's providing something on the other side of the mountain that we can't see. We just got to keep on climbing. That's good. No. Abundantly. Abundantly. He really has. Because, I mean, I know when Dalton was part of the football team, that's every Sunday they went somewhere to a different church. And I'd say, well, how was it? And he would, give me the goods and the bads and stuff like that. And there was a couple, he's like, well, he said they, you know, it was either the preaching or the singing. He wasn't picking them apart by no means, but I think we have a good mix here. We really do. And it's all because we just let God be who he wants to be, and we don't have no preconceived notions. What's that? 9:3? Oh, Colossians. Yeah. Do it heartily. Yep, I would agree. 100%. Anybody else? If not, then let's stand. And Brother Carmen, will you dismiss us in a word of prayer?